What happens when one of the funniest comedians in the world walks onto a talk show expecting laughs? But the conversation suddenly turns serious. What happens when a joke lands? And the response from the host changes the entire mood of the room. Before we dive into this unexpected moment, make sure you subscribe to the Truth Narrator, like this video, and comment below where you're watching from. Because here, we uncover the most dramatic and unforgettable moments from live television. The studio lights were bright that morning on The View. The audience clapped loudly as the hosts introduced their next guest. Walking out with his usual energetic smile was global comedy superstar Kevin Hart. Kevin waved at the audience, joking with the crowd as he took his seat at the table. The atmosphere immediately felt lighter. Kevin had built his entire career on quick humor, playful confidence, and the ability to make anyone laugh within seconds. Sitting across from him was co-host Sunny Hostin, known for her sharp questions and serious commentary. At first, everything felt exactly like viewers expected. Sunny smiled and welcomed him. "Kevin, it's always good to have you here," she said. "You bring energy to this show." Kevin laughed. "I try. I feel like if I don't bring energy, the internet will complain about it." The audience laughed loudly. Another host asked about his latest movie, and Kevin responded with his usual humor. "You know the deal," Kevin joked. "I run a lot, I scream a lot, and somehow I survive until the end of the movie." More laughter filled the studio. For several minutes, the conversation flowed easily. Kevin told stories about filming, joked about his height, and teased the audience about their reactions. The hosts laughed along, clearly enjoying the moment. But then Sunny leaned forward slightly. Her tone changed. "Kevin," she said, "you've built an incredible career making people laugh. But you've also talked about using comedy to address serious issues." Kevin nodded. "That's true." Sunny continued. "So let me ask you something. Do you think comedians sometimes cross the line when they joke about sensitive topics?" The audience reacted with a soft murmur. Kevin paused for a moment. It wasn't the type of question that normally followed a comedy story. He leaned back slightly. "Well," he said slowly, "comedy has always pushed boundaries." Sunny nodded. "But should it?" The room grew quieter. Kevin looked at her carefully. "Sometimes humor is how people deal with uncomfortable truths," he replied. Sunny tilted her head slightly. "But some people say that can also be an excuse." A few people in the audience shifted in their seats. Kevin smiled, but it was different from his earlier playful grin. "I think context matters," he said calmly. Sunny continued. "For example, when a joke touches on serious social issues, do you think comedians have a responsibility to be more careful?" Kevin leaned forward now. "Well, let me ask you something," he said. Sunny looked curious. "What's that?" Kevin smiled slightly. "Do you think comedians should stop talking about difficult topics completely?" Sunny shook her head. "No," Kevin continued, "because if comedians stop talking about real things, then comedy stops reflecting real life." The audience clapped. Sunny nodded thoughtfully. "That's fair," she admitted. But she wasn't done. "However," she said, "some critics believe comedians sometimes dismiss criticism by saying it's just a joke." The tension in the room began to grow. Kevin paused again. This time he looked directly at Sunny. "You want the honest answer?" Sunny nodded. "Always." Kevin leaned slightly closer to the table. "The honest answer is comedy is supposed to make people think." The audience murmured. "But," Kevin added, "thinking doesn't always feel comfortable." Sunny crossed her arms slightly. "So discomfort is the goal?" Kevin shook his head. "No." Then he delivered the line that immediately shifted the mood. "But honesty usually comes with discomfort." The audience reacted with applause. Sunny looked thoughtful. "Well," she said slowly, "this conversation just became more serious than I expected." Kevin laughed. "Hey, you asked the question." The audience laughed again. But behind the laughter, something had changed. What started as a light-hearted interview was beginning to turn into a deeper debate about comedy, responsibility, and the power of words. And the next question Sunny Hostin asked would push the conversation into an even more intense direction, one that would leave the studio audience completely silent. The laughter slowly faded in the studio of The View. Just minutes earlier, the audience had been enjoying the playful humor of Kevin Hart. But now the conversation had shifted into something deeper. Across the table, Sunny Hostin leaned forward again, clearly interested in continuing the discussion. "You said comedy reflects real life," Sunny began. But real life includes pain, conflict, and serious social issues. Kevin nodded. That's true. Sunny continued carefully. So when comedians joke about those issues, do you think the message sometimes gets lost behind the laugh? The audience listened quietly. Kevin thought for a moment. Sometimes it can, he admitted. Sunny raised her eyebrows slightly, surprised by the honest response. But, Kevin continued, sometimes laughter helps people hear things they would normally ignore. A few audience members clapped. Sunny considered the point. That's an interesting perspective. Kevin smiled. It's the comedian's perspective. The hosts beside Sunny chuckled softly. But Sunny's next comment brought the tension back. Some people would argue that comedians have enormous influence, she said. Millions of people watch your shows, your movies, your specials. Kevin nodded. That's true. Sunny leaned closer. So doesn't that influence come with responsibility? Kevin paused. The studio became quiet again. He rested his hands on the table before answering. I think everyone with a public voice has responsibility. Sunny nodded. So comedians too? Kevin smiled slightly. Of course. The audience clapped again. But then Kevin added something that caught everyone's attention. However, responsibility doesn't mean silence. A wave of murmurs spread across the audience. Sunny tilted her head. What do you mean? Kevin leaned forward. I mean, comedians shouldn't be afraid to talk about difficult things. Sunny looked thoughtful. But what happens when people get offended? Kevin laughed softly. Sunny, someone is always going to be offended. The audience burst into laughter. Sunny couldn't help but smile. That's probably true. Kevin shrugged. You could tell the most harmless joke in the world, and someone on the internet will still find a reason to be upset. The crowd laughed again. But Sunny quickly brought the conversation back. So your view is that comedy should remain fearless? Kevin nodded. Yes. Then he added something more serious. Because the moment comedians start worrying about every possible reaction, the art disappears. The audience clapped loudly. Sunny watched him carefully. You sound very passionate about this. Kevin smiled. I am. Then he said something that made the entire studio pause. Because comedy saved my life. The room went completely quiet. Sunny blinked in surprise. That's a strong statement. Kevin nodded slowly. It is. And suddenly the conversation was about to become even more personal, and even more serious than anyone expected. The atmosphere inside the View had changed again. Moments earlier, the conversation had been about comedy and responsibility. But when Kevin Hart said comedy had saved his life, the tone of the entire interview shifted. Across the table, Sunny Hostin looked genuinely curious now. What do you mean by that? She asked gently. Kevin took a breath before answering. Well, growing up wasn't always easy, he said. The audience listened quietly. Kevin continued. Comedy was the one thing that helped me turn difficult situations into something positive. Sunny nodded slowly. So humor was a coping mechanism. Kevin smiled. Exactly. The audience clapped softly. But, Sunny added, not everyone sees humor that way. Kevin shrugged. That's true. Sunny leaned slightly forward again. And that's where the debate about comedy begins. Kevin laughed. And probably never ends. The audience laughed with him. Sunny smiled too. Fair point. But then she asked one final question. Do you think comedians should ever apologize for their jokes? The audience gasped slightly. Kevin leaned back in his chair. That depends, he said. On what? Sunny asked. On whether the joke came from a bad place. The audience murmured thoughtfully. Sunny nodded slowly. So intention matters. Kevin nodded. Absolutely. Then he added something that made the audience erupt into applause. But comedians are human too. We're learning just like everyone else. Even Sunny smiled at that. Well, Kevin, she said, this might be one of the most thoughtful conversations about comedy we've had on this show. Kevin laughed. See, I came here to make people laugh. And now we're having a philosophy discussion. The audience laughed loudly. But the moment had already become something bigger than a typical interview. As the interview began wrapping up on The View, the atmosphere felt very different from when the segment had started. The audience had expected jokes from Kevin Hart. They got those. But they also witnessed a serious and thoughtful conversation with Sunny Hostin about comedy, responsibility, and the power of words. Sunny smiled toward Kevin. I have to say, she admitted, this conversation turned out very differently than I expected. Kevin laughed. Me too. The audience laughed along. But I think it's good. Sunny continued. Sometimes humor and serious conversations can exist in the same space. Kevin nodded. That's actually where the best conversations happen. The audience applauded. Moments later, the segment ended, and the cameras slowly pulled back as the show moved toward a commercial break. But the conversation didn't end there. Within minutes, clips of the discussion between Kevin Hart and Sunny Hostin began circulating across social media. Some viewers praised Kevin for defending the role of comedy. Others applauded Sunny for asking thoughtful questions. Debates started appearing everywhere online. Kevin Hart made a powerful point about comedy. Sunny Hostin asked exactly what needed to be asked. This might be one of the most interesting interviews on The View this year. The moment quickly became one of those rare talk show segments where humor and serious discussion collided in an unexpected way. And now we want to hear from you. Do you agree with Kevin Hart that comedy should remain fearless? Or do you think Sunny Hostin was right to question the responsibility comedians have? Tell us your opinion in the comments below. And if you enjoy dramatic and thought-provoking moments from live television, make sure you subscribe to The Truth Narrator, like this video, and share it with someone who loves celebrity stories. Because on this channel, we explore the moments that make millions of viewers stop and ask, did that really just happen on live TV? Clapperboard.